looks like it's about 7. Hello. Thanks everybody for joining. We're going to be starting in a few moments as we allow some last-minute attendees to log in. But before we start, I wanted to run through some housekeeping items for today's webinar.
No problem.
To stay on time, we'll be answering many of these questions that to be held at the end. So please, if you have any questions, just write them in the chat function as they occur to you. And we'll have Emma on our end, who will summarize them and queue them up for us at the end. Finally, we're currently recording the session, and each one of you will be getting a copy of the recording as a copy of the presentation and a follow-up email. So I think we can probably get started here. Well, my name is Derek Doherty. I'm the Global Sector Head for Retail and FMCG at YouGov. We also have with me Emma Barrett, who is also a data guru at YouGov. Bonjour, Emma. We're both glad to have you guys here for the next 35 minutes. So for those that are not familiar with YouGov, let me go through a little bit of a brief introduction. YouGov is an international research and data analytic group with operations in the UK, North America, mainland Europe, the Nordics, the Middle East, and India, as well as Asia. Our panelists of 17 million registered members deliver thousands of data points on consumer opinions, attitudes, and behaviors on a daily basis. We combine this continuous stream of data with our research expertise to provide insights that enable intelligent decision-making. YouGov has an array of syndicated and custom research that is interconnected. This interconnectivity gives us the ability to dive deeper into consumer behavior and attitudes towards brands. Sourcing for today's presentation will come from 3 YouGov tools, including Brand Index, Profiles, and a little bit of custom direct questions to consumers, just to get a little bit deeper in some of the insights and information. So to the agenda for today. We'll be covering on highlights on alcohol, profiles of the beer lover, brand consideration, usage occasions, sustainability. It's mainly around the UK and Germany, and then hard seltzer in the US. We'll be going through some of the slides fairly quickly. So, as we go through them, if you guys need to go back, you will be getting a copy of this. So we will be covering off on some of the highlighted elements, as I mentioned earlier, so that we can make sure that we're going through this within 35 minutes. Also, a little bit on the focal points that we're going to cover off on. It's really going to be about the US, Great Britain, and Germany. Those are the 3 top markets for consumption for beer. So as you can see, the Germans really lead the way with almost 100 liters per capita of consumption. So those are going to be the focal points within the territories that we cover off on. And as for the 2 sample sizes, we're going to look at Nat Rep, which is really 21 and older in the United States, and then 18 older for the British as well as German. And then for our beer lovers, that's categorized pretty much as is somebody who selects beer as their favorite alcoholic beverage. So let's dive into a little bit more on alcohol consumption. In the US, people are drinking more alcohol. It's a little bit more to digest here. I know the font is fairly small, but if you can see at the very top, it says, I've increased my alcohol consumption over the last year. Well, we know that that's happening. The pandemic has probably caused a lot of effects to the increase. But of those that are increasing their drinking, some of the comments that they have made is that they really don't have a favorite alcoholic beer, and they don't need to have a drink to have fun. The demographics of this increase is also usually not married. The ages between 21, 24, or 54 to 64, and more likely to be female. And their top activities is they really like to drink at home with their spouse. So we know that the pandemic has really had a major effect on some of those causes. If we take a look at the UK, the increase on perceived alcohol consumption is evenly split between men and women. It's more likely not to be married, ages 35 to 54, and the increase likely to be drinking at home as well, just like the US. And if we take a look at Germany, increases in perceived alcohol perceptions are mainly men, ages between 31 and 50, most likely married. And bottom line, for all 3 markets, you can see the pandemic has raised the consumption levels for those that already drink alcohol. So it's not something that's, not apparent. And then in the US, really, that bottom line where I've never drunk alcohol at all, that number coming down shows that there's an increase overall in consumption. Let's go into some of the preferences. In the US, well, before I even start there, let me explain. We're dividing this into spirits, beers, wine, and hard seltzer. And those are the main rationales of what we're kind of like separating them out at. Even though hard seltzer is only 1%, we are going to be diving into that at the end of this presentation. In the US, spirits are the clear leader, with beer coming in next. The top types of alcohol are listed right below the category in order of preference. So if you look at spirits, vodka is the first type of alcohol that they like. Under beer, it's domestic. Under wine is really kind of like the champagne products and the regular wine products. So let me move into Germany or into the UK. Top consideration is spirits, then wine, then beer. And in Germany, beer is king. We do hard seltzer on this because in the US, it's had a slight of a growth level over the last 2 years. We know that hard seltzer will continue to grow as well. There's going to be brand leaders. There's going to be new entries into driving it as well. So even though it's slight in the European markets, US has kind of like led the way. So let's dive into different types of alcoholic beverages that beer lovers like. In the US, among that 17% who have beer as a favorite drink, 50% of them prefer domestic beer. And in the UK, the favorite beer is lager. In Germany, it's called Export, which is a lager as well, or Pils. The German market's quite interesting. As you can take a look, non-alcoholic beer is second in consideration. In addition, consumer preferences for specific varieties are very regional. Let's take a look a little bit further on this regionality. If you take a look, craft beers tend to be favored more towards Berlin, whereas exports and Pils are favored more in the Brandenburg and Mecklenburg, as well as Western Pomerania, Saxonia, and Anhalt. The wheat beer, which is Weissenbier, is favored really in Bremen, Hamburg, Lower Saxony, Schleswig-Holstein, as well as Bayern. So the regionality that happens in Germany, really we don't see a lot of that happening in the US or the UK. So they tend to kind of like their favorite beers as well as kind of like their favorite brands as well. So let's start with beer lovers. And who are they? In the US, there's a lot here to digest. So let's go over some of the highlights overall. In the US, male consumers are pretty dominant, but female is still 30%. That's a significant size, not to be ignored. Income's in the middle to lower. The age group is fairly evenly distributed, except for 21 to 24. And we know that those folks are either not drinking alcohol or drinking flavored alcohols. And the Hispanic market is fairly large. We know that the Asian market is also continuing to grow. If we look at what they like to digest with media, once again, we topple into what their top celebrities are, what the top networks are, and the networks are matched up fairly decent with what the nat reps are, overall of what we've seen as well. And the celebrities that are listed here, we've seen some of them already in commercials that are out there, whether it's in Europe or in the US as well. But social media, Facebook leads the way. We don't see TikTok because the demographic is fairly young, so we expect probably to see that as the demographic starts to move along a little bit more. Now let's take a look at Great Britain. They're mainly men, an older demographic, income slated towards the middle and lower. And we can also measure the income in the British rationale, which is, I believe, ABC1 and some of the other measurements that are there. But in the UK, beer lover is most likely married. They're likely to experience new things, don't mind paying more for good quality beer, and they admit that sometimes they drink too much, so pretty honest. We take a look at some of the media consumption. They like to watch TV and listen to the radio. Their favorite stations, BBC One and ITV1. They love a good comedy and a good documentary. And for social media, once again, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, in those orders. Facebook's pretty much leading the way in all of these markets at this point. And keep in mind, this demographic is older and may have more sedimentary habits that are going on. We can always pull different versions of what we would want to look at when it comes to some of these specific age groups, let alone ethnicities. So let's take a look at Germany. Once again, mainly men, married, middle to lower class. They tend to be an older consumer, smaller household, think beer as an everyday item, which is why we see drinking at home is quite common. The German market's pretty stable. You know, we don't see a lot of more movement of folks. They're well knowledged in their beer category. So, you know, seeing them, you know, make certain sets of changes doesn't seem to be, you know, a main concern. Their main statement they love to state is good quality, and they are willing to pay for it when it comes to their beer. When it comes to the media, they mainly watch TV. They love their news shows, crime shows, and if they're not watching the news, they're watching Netflix and Amazon Prime. And once again, Facebook seems to be, you know, the lead overall, with YouTube and Instagram coming up next. So consideration sets. Let's take a look at some of these. What are the favorite brands? Now keep in mind, these are NAT rep numbers. So in the US, Corona is the top in consideration. As you can see, it's 17%, next to Samuel Adams at 14%. So then you got Heineken as we go down the list here as well. In Great Britain, Peroni's 18%, significantly higher than San Miguel. And then you can see Stella, Guinness, Budweiser, you know, following in suit as well. And then in Germany, Krombacher is the clear leader with Beck's, then a few of the other, you know, localized, you know, German market beers. From the percentages, you can see that these market leaders are on the top of the mind of the consumers. When we compare Nat Rep to beer lovers, once again, beer lovers stating that, you know, that's their favorite drink versus overall Nat Rep, Blue Moon pops up in the top 5. It used to be on the 7th in overall Nat Rep. So it's made its way up there. And then Guinness raises up to 2nd position in Great Britain. And then in Germany, Beck's drops out of the top 5. So if you're interested in, you know, finding some more information about those specific, you know, rationales of those brands, absolutely. But otherwise, most of the rest of the brands have fairly kind of like been stable in their locations of where they're at when it comes between consideration of Nat Rep and beer lovers. When we look at brand purchase into different time periods, if you take a look at 2019, that's on the right side, you can see Sam Adams and Corona were neck and neck in 2019 when it comes to the beer lovers. And in 2021, Sam Adams has resonated a little bit more with the beer lovers and exceeded. So they're at the top of the list now. So we're seeing slight movements that are happening, but if you take a look, you know, it's very slight in a lot of ways, other than Mike's Hard Lemonade on the left side with the Nat Rep, you know, being a 2-point. When it comes over to beer lovers, they rank below the top 10. So we're seeing, you know, certain sets of demographics liking different types of beers at the top. If we quickly take a look at the purchase funnel here, this is how we actually measure some of the insights that we deliver to some of our existing clients. And what we're looking at is awareness, consideration, and intent, and then the conversion that happens between those. So as you can see, you know, awareness being on the top section, you know, all the brands listed here from left to right, and how we actually measure those. We can actually duplicate this in any format, you know, in review. And when it comes to light beer, here's a quick little tidbit. You know, we just did a quick survey report over time on different light beer businesses, and Michelob Ultra stand out in the last probably few months here. They made a announcement that they're going to be spending $100 million supporting women's sports. And as you can see on this chart, the numbers go up significantly, you know, beating out most of the other folks. The crazier thing is, you know, as you remember, female demographic for the US is absolutely at 30%, a little over 30%. So this has affected the purchase behaviors of also the male demographic. So we're seeing some movement when it comes to some of these specific programs that are being delivered out there. So as we take, you know, a look at occasions, there was a white paper that we did a little while ago, and this statement resonated with quite a few players in the space. in which it states one of the keys to growing a brand in penetration and usage is being salient in the minds of the category users across the consumption occasion. A difference between brands winning and losing, which brands occupies mental real estate when the consumers are ready to use. And that's really diving into mental availability. Are your products, salient with those specific occasions that people are making those purchases? So let's start taking a look at out-of-home consumption first. We'll take a look at in-home in a little bit, but we'll start with out-of-home. And if we look at this, across the markets, the occasion preference line up exactly the same in each market. On the top, Friends Ketchup is priority. That's what everyone thinks about, when it comes to consumption out of home with beer. And their main view of that is, it doesn't change from market to market, really. So we're seeing this pattern happen. There'll be slight changes when we start seeing different brands, and we can take a look at that here right now. And here's the fun part. By integrating the data on the occasions and brand consideration, we can start to see which brands do better for different uses and moments. We have used these indices and color coding to see where the brands are doing really well. We are just showing some of these top brands. So a full list of brands are available upon request. But as you can see, different brands have different index values depending on the occasion. For the biggest occasions, which, if I have to explain this on the top of the charts, biggest occasions being on the left side and fewer occasions on the right side. That just means it's happening more often on the left and less often on the right. You want to win on the left, absolutely, but you also want to be cognizant of all these other occasions that are happening. So with the biggest occasions, Coors Light, Budweiser, Guinness, Heineken seem to be doing extremely well. When it comes to family get-togethers, there's a slightly different brand consideration between Corona, Sam Adams, Blue Moon, Bud Light, Stella, and Coors Light. And then when drinking alone, more likely consideration happens with Corona, Budweiser, or even Modelo. So I know there's a lot to digest. So once again, I'm not going to dive even further in this. You will have this to take a look at, where your brands are fitting up in these occasions. When we dive into the US, specifically in Hispanic and Gen Z, we see similar occasions happening with consumption out of home across all the interests. Friends Ketchup being the first, followed by family catch-up or family get-together. So what this really means is that whatever you're probably doing within the national rep, if you just wanted to utilize that with Hispanic and Gen Z, that probably would work out. It's just finding the right media and channels to actually get there. So there's opportunities of reutilizing probably campaigns and making sure that you're there. And if we dive into a specific brand within the US, Corona, let's say, as you can see, there's 3 priorities that are out there for the nat rep: family get together, alone, and watching and attending live events. Well, we can see that family get-togethers drop off with Hispanic and Gen Z. So, the target is really, either alone or watching live events. So as those change, those are probably priorities where you guys can either try to figure out, how do you address those specific demographics with some of your media buys. If we dive into the UK on out-of-home occasions, the biggest occasion remains Friends Ketchup, where brands such as Carlsberg, Australia, San Miguel, and Kronenbourg are within the top considerations. If you take another strong occasion, regular everyday drink, just having a beer, we have a lot of brands in that consideration set. Australia seems to be considered across all key occasions, though, if you take a look at that. Whether it's Friends Ketchup, family get-together, regular everyday drink, watching live events, or even after work with colleagues, it's rated fairly high. If we take a look at the Germans, they have a wide consideration set. Biggest occasion, catching up with friends, same as regular night outs. And for special celebrations, brands such as Schoferhofer beer mix or Francesc Carner is usually more considered. Sorry for the pronunciation. But ultimately, what we're seeing is, definitely out-of-home consumption is really based around, friends get together. When it comes to in-home consumption, let's dive into a little bit further of what that does look like. In-home consumption priority is really staying at home with partner. We do see a little variation right after that, though. So in the US, We're seeing staying home with partners, regular day events, so that kind of lines up with what everything else is going on. But if you take a look at the UK is really looking at um, popping in, watching sports games. So that has kind of like appeared up, a little bit further. And then when we look at Germany, friends catch up raises up a lot higher. So they're still having friends even at home. So we're seeing some movement there. And if we take a look overall at the consumption and occasions, we can see that across staying with partners is a top consideration, as well as Guinness, Sam Adams, Stella are really on top of mind when it comes to in-home consideration. Sporting events are favored by Bud Light, Heineken, Budweiser, and Coors Light. We take a look at Hispanic in the US and Gen Z. Seems to be the same as the Nat Rep. Seems to be really no change. And as my previous comment made, if we want to think about even advertising, for in-home, it really just covers off on, like, if you already have a campaign, it probably matches over and marries up, with what you can do in Hispanic or Gen Z. It's just kind of like, what are the media, routes that you would go through, to attract those specific type of consumers under the distributions. So when we look at Great Britain, biggest occasions is staying with partner and spouse. Two brands over-index on this occasion, Peroni's and Heineken. When they're alone, they're more likely to consider Stella, Carlsberg, Heineken, and we can see that BrewDog index as well in everyday drinking. Carlsberg, Kronenbourg, Heineken, and Stella index very high for watching sports games. So once again, we're seeing variations of how the brands are actually interacting with these occasions. In Germany, staying with your spouse ranks high for Krombacher and Warnstein. Watching sports is pretty much across the board on all the brands. So there's like I said, the German market seems to be a little bit more, well entrenched on their occasions and beer usage, let alone just brand usage. Let's dive in a little bit on sustainability. It's been a high priority for every major company globally, as well as small players in the market. Many companies have committed to achieve sustainability goals by the year 2025. In this category, recycling, packaging, and renewable energy seem to be top of mind. If we take a look on what is really a priority for the beer lovers, well, you can see that in Germany and in England, or the Great Britain, almost 9 out of 10 people, are really concerned about sustainability. In the US, it's about 80%. So when we dive in a little bit further, and here's some information just about the German consumer, these are the things that they care about when it comes to sustainability. When you ask them, like, hey, what does sustainability mean to you? The darker green are things that are more actionable and more, resonant that you guys can do immediately. So recycling, package reduction, alternate circuit, that means just a different store or just using a different product, is going to be their mode of operandi. But probably making sure that, companies, are committing sustainable goals, is something that is communicated, down, to the beer lovers. We'll see a little bit more information on, what type of packaging types here, and what their expectations are, for price elasticity, as they start to think about, are there different things that they can do as well? So type of packaging. In Germany, brown glass bottles. They are the predominant, product that they look for. And there's two main reasons: quality and recycling incentive. The cans, if they have a can recycle, it's 25 cents. If it's a bottle, it's 8 cents. And the brown bottles, the Germans are fairly well known that, they hold out UV light. They like to make sure that their product is fresh and, making sure that it's good quality. So brown bottles usually went out for that. When it comes to the UK, they're fine with clear glass bottles or metal cans. Recycling efforts are still only with the consumer, though. Government has continue to delay their enacting of laws for deposit fees or anything else. I think the latest that we've seen is 2024 is the earliest they're going to have anything that deals with that. Um, so this may change when that does happen, and we'll probably see some, some movement when it does, of like which items are they going to start utilizing for deposits. So let's take a look at elasticities on pricing. When you look at the both markets, anything under 20 cents per beer, they're fine with if they believe that it's going to help the environment. A little bit of a difference is at a younger demographic, they're willing to spend between 20 cents to 49 cents. So just on general, if you're doing the 20 cents, increase in, working on sustainability efforts of like how the product is actually working, that'll probably make sure that that the consumers are filled, their need with sustainable efforts by a company. And then for sustainable segmentation within YouGov, there are 5 categories: planet protectors, price points, green when keen, and on the fence, and then green rejectors. Planet protectors are pretty, they're probably less than 20% of the market. What we did is we actually combined planet protectors, price points, green, and green when keen into one group because they're all worried about sustainability. The 2 bottom ones are just unconcerned about it or just don't even want to deal with it. So when we take a look at a little bit more information about beer lovers, and when we categorize them in sustainability, favorability, the US, 60% of the consumers are in favor. And same thing in Britain. The size of the markets, if we extrapolate that out, is 167 million people in the US are very worried about sustainable efforts and what's happening out there. 8.5 million in the UK. So let's take a look at some of the brands that are perceived this way. So this means that this is what the consumers believe are raising sustainable efforts. So Blue Moon leads the way with Corona and Sam Adams behind it. Once again, this is perception of what is happening out there. What probably can be done to assist with this is if you're showing your sustainable efforts to consumers or beer, your beer lover consumers, that'll probably go well, especially if you're looking at any type of price changes that you guys are looking for as well. They're willing to spend more money if there's sustainable efforts that are going to be working out. So showing your abilities of being sustainable will pay off in the long run. And if we look at Great Britain, Heineken, Peroni, Stella, lead the way. You also see Brewdog here as well. So they're up in a couple of areas, just making sure that sustainable efforts are actually being addressed as well. And then when we dive into hard seltzer, let me switch gears and dive into hard seltzer real quickly. It's mainly in the US. 70% of anybody over the age of 21 has consumed a hard seltzer in the United States. It's still 1%, but it's still 7. That's a significant number. When we look at the demographics, oops, sorry, went one too far. When we look at the demographics, they're predominantly female, middle to lower income status. Age group is 21 to 34. Household is usually around 2, and the ethnicity is mainly white, with Asian, consumers growing. These consumers are willing to pay more for great quality products. They want to be entertained by advertising as well. So as we start to see, this category start to fill out a little bit more, some of these demographics might change, but it is getting to a nice youthful group that's attracting into this market, as we can see. And pretty much we know that they're very marketable. If we take a look at what media they consume, it's really geared towards female viewership. If you take a look at some of the channels that are on here versus the Nat Rep, that's where you're starting to see like National Geographic, Food Network, HGTV popping up on the list. But they're also mainly online with less than 5 hours of TV per week. And then when we take a look at sports ranking with them, compared to Nat Rep, it kind of lines up with some of these. But what indices actually start popping out is where esports and ice hockey start coming in as well. They index well over the national rep. So that's where this consumer is usually at and are looking for. They're trying to be a lot more streamlined, hip, getting towards that younger demographic that's out there, as we saw probably in the earlier slides where the growth levels have been. Also, when we look at consideration of different brands over the last year, it has quite changed all throughout. You'll see different brands leading in different times. The funny thing is, in the last probably 4 months, we've seen Topo Chico really become top of consideration. So we're seeing that there's a lot more happening out there, and whether it's the glass bottle versus cans, those are analysis that we can absolutely dive into. But we're seeing that there's a lot of different players that are happening out there, and probably that's going to continue. Hard seltzers, is an emerging market, and we're going to see that, that new players coming in, and we're going to see major brands probably start positioning themselves within occasions as well, and making sure that they're honing in on their demographic. So in the end, that's pretty much the presentation. But overall, what we covered, beer lovers consideration on occasions have basic similarities across all markets and even demographics. Specific brands are slotted for each one of these occasions. For those occasions saturated in a specific occasion, they can keep those consumers, but then also start looking to address occasions where they may want to improve. And then when we cover off on sustainability, it's a concern, absolutely. Showing your actions, directly with consumers is probably going a long way, and they're willing to pay for it. So those are probably some low-hanging fruits of how some of the sustainable efforts can be publicized. And then hard seltzer is growing. It was triple digits, believe last year. This year it's about double digits, but high double digits. So it's still 1%, but it's a growing category. So we're still seeing a lot of movement once again, and we're still seeing a lot of players, making their position within this. And we're not going to stop seeing new players coming into this market. It's almost like who has the shiny new can and tastes good, is where the consumer preferences might be, depending on how much marketing is put behind it. So at this point, we'll take some questions if there's any questions out there, and take a look and see what we need. Emma?
Yes, there was one question, Derek. Why do you think we saw more women in the US drinking beer than in UK and Germany?
Can you repeat that question again?
Yeah, sure. Why do you think we saw more women in the US drinking beer more than in the UK and Germany? When you presented the profile slides.
Yeah, well, it deserves a lot more analysis than just my opinion on what I've seen or some of the action points. But you have seen a lot more interaction when it comes to the media elements of women being involved in the commercials, women being involved. So there's priorities, as you've seen, like with the Michelob Ultra, them supporting women's sports and stuff like that as well. I also think that women in the U.S. It's not a demographic thing, but it's when you go out, you're going out with all your friends and your spouses or whoever else as well. And so beer consumption and alcohol consumption continue to see their increases. I'd say the eye opener that we have seen is, like I said, where hard seltzers come in and really addressed women's needs. Whether it's flavoring or whatever else it might be at that point. So once again, it does deserve a little bit further insights, from what the U.S. increases are versus over in Europe.
Yeah, that was any question that came up, but obviously if anyone's got any other question, please send them on the chat or let us know.
Yeah, as we close down here as well, I mean, the other thing that we're able to take a look at, as I mentioned, I mean, this presentation is really a topical view of these subject matters. They do deserve a deeper dive, especially if it's your brand, that you're seeing some of the movement on. And here's the thing: even if we take a look at some of the commercials that are out there, pretty much almost all of them address certain sets of occasions. It's whether you see the movement within those occasions as well, right? On what they're doing. So I see, a bunch of people with, beer, on a commercial getting together, or Snoop Dogg walking down a beach, handing out beers, or stuff like that, they're addressing some of these occasions directly, when it comes to those. Just taking a look and making sure, hey, are those specific ones on movement? How are we looking from, one time period to the next? And then what are those demographics within that? I mean, that's the one thing that I believe YouGov can do within the profiles, especially the profiles system, is to specifically identify the consumer that's there. Also, if we talk about, mental and physical availability, once again, occasions, build up towards that mental availability. And this category really builds towards that. We see this more in, this type of loyalty elements of where products, become, almost their mainstay, on how mental availabilities keep reminding them about, what occasion they can use the products in. But if we don't have any more questions, Emma, then number one, thank you for putting all this together, Emma. Appreciate it. The other people I have to thank is Tove, Kenton, Julia, Jacob, Sarah as well, and they're helping out with all this information on pulling it together. And we're here to answer any questions. So if you have further information you guys would like to take a look at, just send an email on over. Oh, yes.
Hold on a minute, Derek. There's got a last minute question. More of a general brand health tracking question. What do you feel consideration indicates?
What do we feel consideration indicates? Well, that's the first step in the purchase funnel. So making sure that you're a part of the consideration. Then you start working down the tunnel, the funnel itself, and making sure that, hey, are meeting some of the other criteria to get to conversion. And that's why we'll take a look at, how that funnel works out. But you do need to get to that first step in consideration in order for you to be in the play. Otherwise, you're almost like an immediate consumption, or an immediate consumption purchase, which is very rare unless you're on, total display at store level or whatever else it might be. There's a lot more brand loyalty when it comes to, beer, alcohol, stuff, soft drinks, any of these major, products that are out there. There's a lot more loyalty that's based out of what the products are. So as you can start building towards that, that's probably going to be your view. And it goes to the old adage. Usually 20% of your consumer are 80% of your purchases. So if you get them through that door to start with, then you probably have them for a long while.
Just on that front, shout out to Kristen for all the good questions. Thank you for asking them. And we can always offline with you to dig into that a little bit more. Last one was regarding Asia from Emily. Yeah, each market, we're going to have different, capabilities, but absolutely, please reach out to us. We've got your information. We can definitely give you some insights specific to Asia. There's a lot of ways that we can go about it, whether it's Hong Kong or other markets.
Yeah, Asia market is absolutely it's especially for the beer and alcohol category. It is a moving target. There are some markets like Australia that are pretty stable. You get to China, in some of these other areas, there's an element of either how you penetrate the market and who does it well, right? We know Carlsberg does extremely well in the market. They figured out the segmentation for some of those territories. As we start to dive in, as Kenton mentioned, we can probably take a look and see, where product positioning can be. And here's the other thing is, how does that work in reverse? As some of these Asian brands want to get over to the US or Europe, what does that look like as well? What does that marketplace look like? All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate everybody getting on. Any more questions? Just give us a call. We're here to help. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.